Turkish Airlines presents Business Africa.
Hello and thank you for joining us on Business Africa. I'm India Yuka, and here are the top stories this week. In 2024, despite global shocks, Africa shows economic resilience with 3.6% growth, but regional disparities persist. In Zimbabwe, sport betting is booming, becoming an economic escape for some and an industry to regulate for others. Taxis and delivery services are joining forces in Botswana through an app that is becoming a model for modernizing urban services. With 11 of the 20 fastest growing economies in 2024, Africa has demonstrated remarkable resilience this year. Which countries are thriving and which regions are lagging behind? Let's find out.
2024 was a challenging year, but it showcased the resilience of Africa's economy. According to IMF and the African Development Bank, average growth is expected to reach 3.6%, driven by fiscal reforms and recovery following recent global crisis. In West Africa, growth is projected at 4.2%, with standard performances in Senegal at 9.8% and Cote d'Ivoire at 7%, thanks to infrastructure investments. However, Ghana continues to face challenges related to inflation and high debt levels. East Africa remains dynamic with projected growth of 4.9%, led by Rwanda at 6.7%. However, tensions such as the war in Sudan could hinder overall performance. Growth in the Maghreb region is expected to reach 3.6%, with Libya leveraging its oil sector to achieve 7% growth. Meanwhile, Algeria and Tunisia face challenges including high inflation and a lack of economic diversification. In Southern Africa, growth is anticipated to remain sluggish at 2.2%, with some improvement in South Africa, while Zimbabwe and Malawi continue to grapple with structural challenges. Finally, in Central Africa, growth is expected to stabilize at 4.1%, driven by the Democratic Republic of Congo at 5.7%. However, vulnerabilities such as high debt persist. The IMF notes that reforms are needed to ensure debt sustainability, and the devaluation of the CFA franc may be considered to address certain imbalances.
To analyze this economic dynamics, we're joined this week by Samuel Maté, economic and president of FAFED.
Monsieur Maté, bienvenue dans Business Africa.
Welcome to the show. Tell us about the resilience of African countries despite global shocks.
Les économies qui sont très fortes.
Strong economies don't necessarily show high growth.
Generally,
it is observed that relatively complex economies advance quickly. So when we talk about growth, it means that population consumes more because the government manages to spend less but generate more revenue. This means investing more and exporting more than importing. When you look at Africa, you realize that consumption is not necessarily the driving force, because consumption only becomes significant when there is a large middle class. When you have a lot of poor people, consumption is low because they can't afford to buy. Even the rich don't consume much. Today, the elements are favoring Africa are primarily investments, government spendings, and imports and exports.
Et c'est tout ce qui est comme alors import-export.
So to sustain this growth, more investments are needed.
Exactly. Another factor is a surge in commodity prices, particularly oil. This price increase have benefited African producers. Today, we have several African countries that have discovered oil and have developed energy sources. This has actually led to some countries having exports that, in my view, are artificially higher than imports.
The IMF suggests devaluing the CFA franc to address CEMAC imbalances. Is this viable?
Currency represents the market price. It has value and acts as a medium of exchange. There are a few mechanisms to assess a currency's value. One of the first and more economic mechanisms is that it's determined automatically by supply and demand. The second approach is having a fixed exchange rate. But the problem with the latter is that the value of the currency is determined by the demand for it. If we realize that many people aren't asking for it because few people buy in CFA, the value of that currency will deteriorate. It will lose much of its value. When you devalue a currency, you are essentially reducing its value. This makes the currency cheaper, which can be attractive. It's not necessarily negative, but you also need to produce goods that will interest people outside the country. The other side of devaluation is that people in the country where the currency is devalued become poorer.
Thank you for your insights.
You're welcome, and it is my pleasure.
The boom in gambling in Zimbabwe is transforming the informal economy. Let's take a look at the challenges and opportunities of this rapidly growing sector.
Gambling and betting are booming in Zimbabwe, with the rise of sports betting shops offering a lifeline to many in a struggling economy. The jobless take their chances to make some money, others to double their earnings.
The recent boom that you are making reference to could be really confirmation that to a significant extent there are some who might now be taking it as a livelihood.
Zimbabwe's gambling industry grew 8.5% in 2024, the fastest in Africa. However, the expansion has triggered a rise in unauthorized betting shops, prompting a ban on the opening of new outlets. To manage the surge, the government introduced a 10% tax on gross winnings, which a local economist says targets all informal sectors, not just betting.
As the economy gets informalized, then the people who are paying formal taxes are actually getting less. So they will tax, at the moment they are taxing about anything, churches, chicken, pasta, you name it, sports betting. They're going after every dollar that they can in order to have their day-to-day operation.
In a largely informal economy, some hope betting will grow into a regular industry, providing opportunities for employment. I hope it expands because it has become a source of work for many. As Zimbabwe's betting industry flourishes, it flits between growth and regulation, raising questions about its long-term social and economic impact.
A
taxi app in Botswana now offers much more than just transportation. It also allows users to shop online and have their groceries delivered in less than an hour, reducing daily hassles to its users.
In Botswana, Joseph Ngaiti launched a taxi app in Gaborone, inspired by Uber to improve transportation. He recently added a feature allowing users to stop online at a supermarket and receive their orders via his taxi service. This idea came to him when he was stuck at home without a car and unable to shop for groceries. He created an app to place orders and receive them quickly.
I mainly came up with the idea because I had, during December, I had a situation where I didn't have a vehicle and I wanted groceries, and it was a struggle for me to get the groceries. So I went into just developing an app that could help people.
Inshelve cab delivery combines taxi and delivery services, enabling customers to select products from a partner supermarket and receive their orders in under an hour.
In our head office, we have a base where we receive calls for the cabs. We also use platforms that are digital for our drivers. They use digital as well as they receive calls.
For 8 years, Joseph struggled to create a functional app for his country, but the integration of Inshelve grocery delivery with his taxi service has been a success. Today, he employs around 30 people and operates a fleet of 26 taxis.
We also have independent drivers who work with us on an independent basis. So anyone can register as a driver. You just need to pass our background check.
Joseph aims to expand his taxi app to other cities and recently launched Inshelve in Zimbabwe. He hopes to replicate this success with his next app, supported by Botswana's Innovation Hub.
That concludes Business Africa. To rewatch this episode, visit Africanews.com and on our digital platforms. Wishing you a Happy New Year. See you soon.
Business Africa was presented by Turkish Airlines.